Scene 1. She is running across a 6-lane freeway at midnight. Texas heat rising off asphalt. Headlights screaming toward her like judgment. Blood still wet on her face where his rings split her lip open an hour ago. 36 cents in her pocket. Behind her, a hotel room where a man is sleeping who owns her name, her money, her work, and every achievement she has ever built. Ahead, across the roaring dark, a glowing sign she can barely read through swollen eyes. And somewhere between the woman she was and the woman she is about to become, the most dangerous question she has ever faced. After 16 years of being told she was nothing, is there anyone left inside her worth saving? Scene 2. Rewind 16 years. She is 19 years old, watching someone command a room like he owns the air itself. She wants what he has, that authority, that presence, that certainty. She moves toward it. Something in his eyes makes her stomach tighten in a way she won't understand for years. But when he finally gives her a chance to show what she can do, something happens in that room that neither of them can ignore. People lean forward, and in the silence after, she sees the exact moment he decides. This ability will belong to him. Scene 3, the partnership becomes a machine, a wall of output that makes them exceptional. And external validation, praise from the highest authority in their world, becomes the lock on her cage. Because now there is proof. Now there are witnesses. Now the world has confirmed exactly the thing that is destroying her. Behind every achievement, there is a ritual no one discusses. His cruelty before the first attempt. Her compliance as the price of the next opportunity. She learns to translate pain into performance so seamlessly that the world sees only the result, never the cost. The institution watches. The institution applauds. The institution signs the paperwork. After all, she is his creation, and creations don't get to leave. Scene 4. A clerk slides a form across a counter. Your husband will need to sign this before we can process your request. She stares at the person behind the glass. The account has her name on it. The value came from her labor. The work was built from her sacrifice, and she cannot access what is hers without his permission. She walks out with nothing, not because the resources don't exist, because she doesn't have the right to touch what she earned. That night, she performs for thousands. The recognition is deafening. She returns to a space where a man is waiting, to remind her that applause changes nothing about who owns whom. Scene 5. The violence that happens is not exceptional. It is routine. He harms her while the world looks away. By the time it is over, she is bleeding, and she is supposed to show up and perform anyway. She does. And something about watching her own suffering spread across everything she has built finally breaks the spell. She sees the next 16 years. She sees herself at 52, still bleeding into her work, still performing, still owned. And for the first time, the future terrifies her more than leaving. Scene 6. Something shifts behind her eyes. After everything, he falls asleep with his fists still clenched. She sits on the edge of the bed and waits. The clock moves. At one point, she stands and walks to his side. Her hand hovers. She could wake him. She could tell him she's leaving. She could give him the chance to stop her. Or the chance to kill her. Her hand stays suspended in the dark for what feels like hours. Then she pulls it back, takes what little she can legally claim, and somewhere around 2 in the morning, she steps through the door with 36 cents and a decision that will erase one version of her life completely. Scene 7. The crossing is terrifying. She crosses anyway. She keeps moving toward the other side because the woman who walks into that lobby is never walking back out. She asks for help. They see the damage. They help her anyway. She locks the door, sits down, and feels something she hasn't felt in 16 years. Silence that belongs to her. Scene 8, the separation proceedings begin. He contests everything. Documents spread across tables like autopsies. She sits across from people who explain patiently that she is entitled to half of everything. The returns from her labor, the rights to work that still circulates everywhere, the assets her output built. And she tells them to give it all away. Every cent, every right, every object that carried her to places where she bled for people who never knew. She wants only one thing, her name. Why would someone give away a fortune for 6 letters? Scene 9, 4 years pass. She walks out owning nothing but her name. The world's verdict is unanimous. She is finished. A woman in her mid-30s with no support, no resources, no institution, and no man to vouch for her is not a comeback story. She is a cautionary tale. She moves into a room she can barely afford. The first night, she sits on a mattress on the floor and stares at a wall. No audience, no applause, no one watching. For the first time in her adult life, she has to answer a question that terrifies her more than he ever did. Without him telling her what she is, who is she? Scene 10. She starts from zero, not metaphorically, literally. She shows up to work in rooms where people don't know her name, where the crowd is 12 people, then 8, then sometimes 4. She is not rebuilding a career. She is learning for the first time whether her work means anything when no one is required to care. One night, in a room with folding chairs and water-stained ceilings, she finishes and opens her eyes. A woman in the front row is crying. Not performing emotion, actually crying. She approaches the woman afterward and asks why. The woman says, "I don't know who you are, but that was the most honest thing I've ever witnessed." She walks home that night and sits on her mattress and realizes, for 16 years, she thought she needed permission to exist. She doesn't. She never did. Scene 11. What happens next is not a straight line. There are nights she almost calls him. Nights she wonders if the world was right. If she made the worst mistake of her life. If she is going to die alone in a room no one visits. But every morning she gets up. She works. She strips away one more thing he taught her. The careful translation of pain into spectacle. Until what remains is something raw. Hungrier. Unrecognizable. And slowly the rooms get bigger. The audiences lean in. People who dismissed her start to whisper a question they can't answer. What changed? Scene 12. She is alone in a rented apartment when the phone rings. A voice on the other end says something that doesn't make sense. She hangs up, sits in silence, picks up the phone and calls back to make sure it wasn't a joke. It wasn't. Suddenly, everyone wants to understand the woman they spent years ignoring. They ask about the comeback. She corrects them. This is not a comeback, this is a first arrival. The woman who spent 16 years as a supporting character in someone else's story has finally been allowed to exist on her own terms. And she sounds like no one else, because for the first time, she sounds only like herself. Scene 13. She reaches heights that once felt impossible. Thousands of people witnessing a woman who once owned 36 cents. She works in conditions she chose, toward goals she controls, commanding spaces that answer to no one but her. The world that declared her finished now scrambles to explain what it missed. But standing in that success, she feels something she didn't expect. Grief. Grief for the woman who endured 16 years believing this moment was impossible. Grief for every version of herself who died so this one could stand here. The victory is real, but it is not simple, and she will spend the rest of her life learning how to hold both truths at once. Scene 14. Years later, she will describe a specific morning, kneeling, repeating something she didn't yet understand, and feeling a knot loosen in her chest that had been tied since she was 19 years old. The slow, deliberate practice of finding a self that exists without external permission. But those who were there, in the empty rooms, in the long years of being no one, know the truth runs deeper. She survived because she decided to survive. She rebuilt because she decided to rebuild. The woman who crossed that freeway was not running away from a man. She was running toward a version of herself that had been waiting 16 years to breathe. Scene 15. Somewhere in the dark, There is still a woman running through headlights with blood on her face and nothing in her pocket but a decision. She doesn't know yet that she will build a life beyond recognition. She doesn't know that the name she refused to surrender will outlast everything he thought he owned. She only knows that the woman who reaches the other side of that asphalt will never be owned again. Scene 16, August 2023. A bedroom filled with morning light. She is 83 years old and she is dying. A nurse adjusts her pillow. Somewhere in the house, music is playing. Not hers, just music. The radio left on. Her eyes are closed, but her hand moves to her chest, and for a moment her fingers press against her sternum, right where a bruise used to bloom every few weeks for 16 years. The skin there has been untouched for decades. She takes one more breath. And then, in a room that belongs to her, in a body that belongs to her, in a silence she chose, she lets go. Scene 17, fade to black. Then over darkness, the sound of traffic. Headlights sweep across the screen. And we hear her voice, not old, not young, but somewhere in between, asking the question one last time. Is there anyone left inside me worth saving? Then, quieter, almost to herself. There always was. I just had to cross the road to find her. Title card. Her name, just her name, nothing else.